Hey everybody, Brandon here. Welcome back to a new video. Today we're going to be covering game number 3 on my 7th tournament. Now I am again playing with the black pieces. I currently have a score of 1.5 out of 2. I drew my first game and won my second. And now I am playing against someone who is almost 1900 rating. Pretty much 1900. They're 1898, I believe. And I am playing with the black pieces. I am a huge underdog here, and I'm hoping to come out on top. Now let's see how the game progresses. We see knight to f3 from my opponent, Constantine. Knight to f6 from me, d4, g6, c4, and bishop g7. So we're now seeing something that I used to play quite a bit. I'm playing this setup that I pretty much played last game, where I just play knight f6, g6, bishop g7, and d6, and castle. And it's a very reliable setup. We see knight c3, so we're seeing a little bit of a different setup from my opponent this time. They're instead playing with c4 and d4, and of course not blundering the e4 pawn by playing e4. I played d6, bishop g2, knight d7, and e4. Here, the biggest reply is e5, so this is what I play. It's the most reasonable, as you're trying to counter attack in the center, and in the future maybe go for an f5 and to attack on the king side. But okay, now we see castles. Knight to h5, so this is a little bit of a weird move. It just doesn't really make too much sense in the position. Just because I was going for f5, I believe, but the knight on h5 weirdly just does not make too much sense. Instead, a move like c6 is actually quite strong here, because, well, if ever takes or ever push, there are two options. We can go for c5, and this is a little bit of a weird position, but it's actually playable. Or we can consider taking or even ignoring it with a move like queen to b6. But those lines, it's a very tricky position, and you have to be very careful here. Actually, knight c5 might even be better, attacking e4. But the whole point of these lines is it gets you into pretty much a Benoni position where they play g3 and bishop g2, and this is completely playable for black. But okay, I played knight h5 instead, as normally in these positions you want to play f5, so it's just going for that. This was the one plan I knew. So if you know a plan and you can't think of anything else, then at least try something, right? Any plan is better than no plan at all. D takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5. Here I took with the bishop, and it doesn't really make sense why I did. Instead, taking with the pawn is better. The immediate knight d5 just can be kicked away with c6, so that doesn't make too much sense. And trading, you can also play c6, and after knight e7, king f8, and takes, bishop e3. The a pawn might be a little awkward to defend here, as if you bring a rook back, then white can try to hold onto the file here, so you'll have to defend it in a weird way. But other than that, it's a playable position, and this is much better than bishop takes e5. So bishop h6, bishop g7, and I trade off my dark squared bishop. And this is something that you don't really want to do, but I felt like it was necessary, and I can't argue that it wasn't, even to this point. Now f4, and I played a move here that I'm actually surprised at looking back on it, because this is something I might not even play nowadays. It was the move c6, and this is actually a very good move. And the reason why I say I wouldn't play it normally nowadays is because the d6 pawn is quite weak. However, c6 does have concrete ideas of d5. However, you need to preface that with the move f5. And this is actually what I played in the game. And I find this very surprising, because this is not play I would normally come up with nowadays. And if I was seeing it then I feel a sense of pride because of it. So king to h1. And now f5. The whole point is we're trying to undermine the e4 square, because e4 is controlling d5. So we can, if we can get rid of the if we can get rid of this pawn, then d5 will be a lot easier to play, and we won't have any problems. However, it's not so easy. f5, they really should ignore it. Either way, if they take or if they push, they are losing control of d5, and they pushed in the game, which wasn't quite good. And same thing with takes. There's also bishop takes, and we get our pieces out, and we have no real issues in this position. So after e5, the problem is the e5 pawn is actually quite weak in this position. I took, we saw f takes, and I decided to trade queens as this is what I was comfortable with. We see rook a takes d1, rook to e8, so I'm targeting the e pawn, rook fe1, and bishop e6. We really need to improve our pieces the best we can. We at least have a threat now, and this pawn is going nowhere as my knight and my bishop control the square. And you can see that maybe a king f7 even controls the e6 square even more. And this is just a huge weakness in the position because it's also not able to be defended by other pawns. So after bishop to e6, we see b3, rook a to d8. The more pieces we trade here, the more prevalent this weakness becomes. So that it was my goal here. Rook to d6, I think this was a fascinating move. The whole point is after takes, and rook to d8, there is the move c5. And all of a sudden, it's not so easy to break down this structure anymore. So, of course, I did not want to take, and I didn't. So I played the interesting move rook to d7, preparing to double up. And I should have followed through on this after rook e to d1, because if I just play rook e to d8, then after takes, if they just trade everything off, this is going to be a huge problem. But for some reason, I was scared here, and I did not play rook to d8, and this was just the wrong choice. I played rook d to e7, which is just quite passive, and I'm giving up the open file, though I do have ideas of bishop to f7 to win the pawn. It's not as concrete as just trading off all the rooks, where my king can just run up the board and catch the pawn quite easily. So rook to d8 was played. I ignored it. I played bishop to c8. I didn't want to see anything happen here with the rook somehow getting in. So I thought it would be a good move. Rook takes e8, and rook to e1, defending their pawn. I played knight e6. I'm trying to get the piece active. And b4. And here I played rook to d8, which I think is a good move because now no one's controlling the file. I need to control it. And if they were to move back, then I'm willing to trade now and play king f7, knight d4, and king e6 and win the pawn. And this is what I should do. So b5, now it's a little tricky. They're trying to break down the structure. It's a little confusing here. However, I do have a sequence of moves. So the move bishop d7 itself isn't quite great because there's a rook to d1 and they can kind of pin everything. Not quite, but it's not an ideal position. This would be quite ideal though. So rook to d3 and first, and the whole point is now there won't be any pins on the d file. So after rook to d3, rook to c1, and I can play bishop to d7. And if takes, then just takes, and this is a great position for me. e5 is still weak, and c4 is weak. And even though these pawns are equally weak, they have one more weakness than I do. So I would consider black to be slightly better here because of this. But I played rook to e3. I gave up the file, and I'm not sure why. This rook e3 just doesn't do much here because they can just take on c6, and after they take on c6 and I take on e5, we just liquidate one of our weaknesses for the other, and this doesn't hold any interest to me in this type of position. This just doesn't look like it's anything anymore, as they got rid of their problem pawn for one of my pawns that weren't weak at all. In this position, when we look at these pawns, they're not weak at all, so it's just quite confusing. But okay, I played rook to e3, and they played knight to d5, which is a fascinating move. The whole point is they're just trying to trade off these two pawns and get activity. This was a fascinating move. I ended up taking c takes and bishop d7, where d takes and bishop takes. I'm attacking e5, but unfortunately this rook e3 allowed all of this stuff, and now they can take on b7, and I have to take on e5. And in this position, I thought I was worse. though I don't really think that's too much of the case. I think it's about even. It's just that they have the outside pawn, so it is quite scary, and they played a4, so they're ready to start pushing. I played rook to e2, just cutting off the king. This is a normal idea. You want to put your rook on the 7th or 2nd rank. For me, it's the 2nd rank, but you would also call it the 7th because when you are looking at it from your point of view, it's the 7th rank. But okay, rook to e2, a5, and here I really should have gone rook to a2. The whole point is that b6 doesn't work because I can just take on a5 and then take on b6 if I need to. And if they have to play a move like a6, which, you know, is a good move, it defends the pawn. The thing is, b6 will be harder to play, and I can play rook to b2, and you're just not going to get b6 in so easily, because if b6, I can take with my rook now. So this was ultimately what I should have gone for, but I messed up. I wasn't too great with rook endgames, or endgames, anything similar to this, so I played rook to b2, which allows bishop to c6, and now they're still able to get b6 in. Not immediately, but it's still in the position. Rook to d2 now, and now b6. I'm not sure why I moved my rook away. In reality, I should have just played a move like king to f7, just improving my worst piece, because this is already on a good square. There's no reason to move my rook. I think I was just scared of pawn pushes. But okay, b6, rook d8, and rook b8. And now I am losing material here, and probably should just be losing this game, because after rook a8, takes, and bishop c8, they can win my bishop. By playing b7, for threatening to promote, I have to sacrifice my bishop for the pawn, and they have a bishop and 2 pawns versus my 3. And with reasonable conversion, as long as they don't make certain moves or trading one of these pawns, specifically this pawn, because they need to have a knight pawn or any of these pawns to be able to win the game. However, this pawn for them would be drawing, and this is actually important for later on. King to g2, king to g7, just trying to improve my piece. King f3, king f6, and b7. So they were just improving their piece. It shows great conversion by them that they're just willing to just delay it by a few moves, because they're always going to have it in the position, but now they went for it. And g5. Now we see bishop c8, and I played h5, and I am pretty much threatening to draw here. They played h3, which draws on the spot, but for example, here it's actually not so easy, because after a move like king to g2, there's actually moves like h4 in the position. And the whole point is that king f2, for example, if I take, they cannot take with the king, because this is a losing endgame. Instead, they have to take with the pawn, because they need it to promote. But I just have the move f4, and surprisingly, this is a draw. And the reason why is because after g4, king d4, they can actually not make any progress here, because somehow they cannot move their king without me promoting my pawn, as my king is too active here. And I thought I had a similar situation in the game. However, in the game after h3, it's a very simple draw with just g4 check. They're forced to take somehow, and after takes, I can just play f4, and this forces the pawn off the board. They can take on g4, I take on g3, and this is just a draw, obviously. There's no way to force a checkmate with just the bishop. So this did not happen though. I played h4, and I'm not sure why, and unfortunately now, I think the whole point is I was trying to take, but the thing is they just have g4, and after f takes g and h takes g, this is losing. King e5, I thought I had activity like the previous position, but unfortunately they were too active, and they're able to shoulder my king away, and their bishop is covering the promotion squares. So in this position, I resigned, and now we are 1.5 out of 3. Though I didn't hold it too much against myself, I was pretty upset that I missed the draw and that I had a better position at some points. But overall, playing against someone that's about 400 or 500 rating higher than me, I didn't think I did too bad. Anyways, the lesson I'll take away from this game is make sure you know your endgames. Make sure you go for activity, and make sure you don't allow the trading off of one of their weaknesses for something that isn't a weakness for you. In this position, this pawn is weak. These pawns aren't quite that weak. However, my opponent found some combinations and was able to trade off their weakness for one of mine, and they're just able to trade off their weakness rather, as I don't have one. So unfortunate. Again, these games will happen. This is normal, so it's just best to forget about them, or not forget, to learn from them and move on. That's the best thing to do. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in game 4. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you then.